Hi everyone, and thanks for watching my video. For my organizational communication project, I chose to focus on email communication in the workplace. Through my own personal experiences and research that I've gathered on the internet, I've compiled a list of some really interesting studies that focus on the different factors of email communication and why we misinterpret things that we read or things get misinterpreted when we send them to people. Did you know that 43% of people in the workplace actually blame email communication for any misinterpretations, resentment, and conflict they've had with their coworkers? That means that almost half the people that you work with have held some kind of grudge against you because of something you might not have even meant to say. So, for this project, I wanted to take a look at why we misinterpret emails so frequently. It turns out that there are actually a lot of factors. One of those factors that I read about in this class specifically was the lack of social presence in emails. Social presence, as we learned, was that warm and comfortable feeling we get when we're having a face-to-face conversation with somebody. When you're having that kind of conversation, there are nonverbal cues that we pick up on that we don't get. We're not afforded those when we're having an email conversation. You get judged by someone's closeness or their eye contact, whether or not they're really in the conversation, and that's not something that we get with email communication. So the lack of the social presence makes it really hard to pick up on any cues that the conversation might be going negatively or even positively, depending on how you're actually misinterpreting or interpreting the email. It also turns out that gender plays a big role in email communication differences as well. There was a study done that analyzed 16 billion emails over the course of several months. There were 2 million participants, and all kinds of information was gathered from this. Specifically, we found out through this study that men and women differ pretty greatly when it comes to the response time on emails and the length of the responses of these emails. Men in general tend to respond to emails quicker, and their messages are generally shorter than that of women's. So women might be typing more thoughtful, well choreographed emails, and then we receive one from a man and it's a little shorter, and that could come off as curt, when in general it's just a gender norm and it's not something to be taken negatively. Email communication is also heavily dictated by culture. To draw on Hall's theory of proxemics, research has found that where a person is from will heavily influence the way they communicate via email, whether that be politeness or directness, task-based versus relationship-based orientation. These things are all factors to keep in mind as more companies operate internationally and more people are communicating across oceans. David Swink from Psychology Today emphasized more about nonverbal cues and their importance in communication, specifically when it comes to physical and psychological climate between coworkers. Physical climate is easy to understand. You know that your coworker is generally going to be in the same building or office as you, and you're pretty familiar with the climate around them. But psychological climate is different. Your coworker might be busier than you, working on more strenuous time constraints, whereas you might be caught up and in a happier mood, and this will affect the way that you both read each other's emails when you're communicating. So now that I have a good insight as to why people communicate differently, I'm going to use this information on my own in my workplace to effectively communicate better via email. I have 11 months until my next annual review, and in that time, I'm hoping to reduce or avoid any conflict between coworkers and customers and receive praise in my review from my office manager and how well I've effectively communicated. I have a list of things that I plan on doing and a list of things I plan on not doing when communicating that should help me achieve my goals. The first part of my plan involves no text speak. What I mean by that is completely getting rid of any language that involves LOL or BTW or things like that in any emails to customers or coworkers, because sometimes that can be misconstrued and interpreted just immature and not responsible for the workplace. So I will no longer be using any terms like that. Also, I plan on reducing my use of emojis depending on the relationship I have with the receiver of my emails. Secondly, who am I talking to? I work for an international company that has customers and coworkers from all over the globe. So everyone has a different background, and now that I know that your culture and where you're from really affects how you might email people, I'm going to start taking that into mind when I receive an email. Hopefully, I'll stop interpreting things the wrong way and can better understand where people are coming from. Thirdly, in my plan, I will no longer be sending emails when I need something from somebody and leading with pleasantries. Sometimes this can be construed as manipulative, or you're starting by buttering somebody up before you really ask them what you need. Instead, I will be more direct with people, ask them what I need first, and then I'll end with pleasantries if I feel necessary. It's okay to ask for help. When I have been in a situation before with coworkers, if I've needed to, I can always ask my boss for help. That means if I've ever received an email from somebody that came off maybe not as they might have intended, I can always call my manager over and have him read it as well. And sometimes hearing his information or his input on how he interprets the email kind of helps me step back and take a look and see, okay, maybe the person meant this instead of the way that I'm taking it. So I, moving forward, make sure to keep asking him for help when it comes to interpreting emails the right way. And lastly, when I get an email that upsets me, I will not be responding immediately to that email. So often you get an email and it upsets you and your blood boils and you just want to email right away, and that's not always the healthiest thing to do. You're in a compromised state, so instead I'm going to walk away from any emails that I get that I interpret offensively or just make me feel really angry. I'll step away, assess my psychological climate one more time, come back to the email about an hour or so. Maybe after I've relaxed, I can reread the email and say, hey, that actually didn't mean to come off that way, and I can definitely understand how someone would have meant it this way versus the way that I originally took it. And when not responding to emails immediately when you have a negative emotional reaction will help reduce conflict moving forward instead of inciting conflict by responding right away with a negative tone yourself. So in conclusion, there are many factors that affect how people communicate via email. Email communication is inevitable for everyone across the globe. So unfortunately, no matter where you work or what you do, you're probably going to have to communicate with someone at some time via email. You can take what we learned today and implement the steps that I'm trying to implement, and hopefully by the end of your work career, you won't have 43% of people turned against you because of something you didn't even say. Thanks so much. Bye.